I think, like a lot of Adventure Time fans, at some point I came to the realization that I was more invested in a few ideas from a handful of episodes than I was the majority of the show's actual content. The brief snapshots of Adventure Time's darker, more complex subplots, glimpses at how the show might handle themes like Armageddon, dementia, and puberty are what really hooked me, more so than the dungeons, the monsters, and to be honest, Adventure Time's actual adventuring. This dissonance in what fans wanted to see and what Adventure Time actually was resulted from the double-edged sword of how Adventure Time was written. Creator Pendleton Ward might have been one of the most hands-off showrunners to ever helm their own series, giving storyboarders virtually unrestricted free reign over their episodes, leading to some experimenting with mature themes and grander narratives that helped expand the show's audience beyond the traditional Cartoon Network demographic. But similarly, whoever boarded the next episode also had those same freedoms and was under no obligation to follow up on the ideas or plots from the previous episode. This led to Adventure Time basically being the definitive series for gesturing vaguely at some deeper significance and letting fans fill in the gaps with speculation and theories. And this is where Fiona and Cake comes in. The newest entry into the Adventure Time canon, the spin-off expands on the adventures of Fiona and Cake, gender-swapped versions of Finn and Jake, who were created by the writers of the original series, lightly satirising the fanfiction of their own audience. A recurring motif throughout the show, Fiona and Cake were the in-universe fanfic characters written by the Ice King, the show's eccentric antagonist, and their episodes proved to be incredibly popular, providing a sort of playful fanservice by leaning into the fandom's obsession with shipping. Given this background, I'll be honest, my expectations for the series were low. Don't get me wrong, I liked the original Fiona and Cake episodes, but I never thought it was an idea strong enough to carry an entire show. So them getting a new spin-off series stank of a decision mandated to create new content from a popular IP to promote a streaming service, rather than it did an organic choice from someone creative who had a story to tell. And quite frankly, I couldn't have been more wrong. I was preparing myself for 10 episodes of safe, uninspired, gender-bent Adventure Time shenanigans, but what I got was not just a really good show, not just one of the best spin-off continuations of any series in a really long time, but what I really got from Fiona and Cake was Adventure Time finally delivering on a lot of the promise and potential it had always had. The series follows Fiona Campbell, not the heroic gender-swapped femme-fin we're used to, but an underachieving 20-something with an abrasive sense of main character syndrome, struggling to hold a dead-end job in a distinctly non-magic city. The reason behind this change in circumstance from the previous appearances of Fiona is revealed to be a result of Simon Petrikov, formerly the Ice King, losing his magical abilities following the finale of Adventure Time, which caused him to regain his sanity but came at the sacrifice of his fiancée Betty. And because Fiona and Cake reside in the magical fanfic dimension within the Ice King's mind, and the Ice King lost his magical powers, so did their world. This all comes to a head when Simon, struggling without purpose in an unfamiliar world and failing to cope with the loss of Betty, attempts a ritual to bring her back, but inadvertently brings Fiona and Cake into Ooh, and with the help of Prismo, three decide to jump through the Adventure Time multiverse in order to search for Ice King's crown in order to restore magic to Fiona's world. Now, admittedly, unless you've watched Adventure Time, none of that makes any sense. This definitely isn't a show you can watch without being at least somewhat familiar with the main series, but as someone who is, this premise is infinitely more interesting and ambitious than anything I was expecting from a silly fanfiction spin-off.
I saved Marceline by putting on the crown, but it could have easily backfired. And in the long run, I did hurt her.
Was there another way to save her?
Well,
Oh.
And to be honest, spin-off isn't the right word. Fiona and Cake is a full-on sequel. We're revisiting Ooh decades after the finale and dealing with the unresolved fallout that it's had on Simon. I think that's probably the most impressive thing about Fiona and Cake. How this new story fits seamlessly within Adventure Time canon, telling the tale of what are functionally new characters in Fiona and Cake, whilst weaving in the natural continuation of Simon's unresolved character arc and exploring those themes, and expanding the lore of the original setting. The old and the new never seem to clash. Fiona and Cake doesn't have to undo something in order to force through its story. Instead, everything complements each other perfectly. This is what every sequel, spin-off, reboot, reimagining, whatever should strive for. And it's honestly something I wish we'd seen more of from Adventure Time itself. Adventure Time never had 10 consecutive episodes this consistently focused, and it's the kind of deeper exploration of themes that the original show always had the potential to deliver, but never really did.
But wait, this isn't how it happened.
No, we made our choices. We could have made better ones, but I don't have any regrets.
It certainly helps that Fiona and Cake is rated TV-14 rather than PG. There's nothing explicit beyond a few swears, but pitching the show at a young adult audience feels like the perfect call, just for tone if nothing else. Fiona and Cake doesn't necessarily always feel darker than Adventure Time, but it is more contemplative. It gives more breathing room to its heavier scenes, which might not have been possible had the show felt the need to cater to a more young audience. In fact, tonally, Fiona and Cake reminded me more of Infinity Train than it ever did Adventure Time, although that might just be down to all the dimension hopping. And on that, I know I've focused mostly on how big and clever and mature Fiona and Cake is, but fundamentally, this show is just incredibly fun to watch. As the lead trio jump between the different realities, as a fan of the setting, it's exciting to see the series get creative in how all these alternate takes on Ooo play out. What happened to Farmworld? What if the Ice King wasn't insane? What if vampires took over Ooo? What's happening with Marshall Lee and Gary in Fiona World? And what if BMO just fucking died?
It's working! Whoops.
And with all these different realities and permutations playing out, credit to the writing here, the series never feels clustered or overwhelming. It never loses sight of the main narrative and uses these what-if scenarios to accentuate its themes and storytelling. I mean, that ending to episode 7 with the contrasting shots of PB and Marcy killing each other in one universe while their counterparts are getting together in another is just perfect. And as much as the show likes to play around with different timelines, I also love how the show plays with different visual styles. Whether it's the storybook looking opening scene, or the low poly 90s PC game visuals of Casper and Nova, or the beautiful Winter Wonderland song animated by Smallboo, every time Fiona and Cake steps outside its regular look, it is fantastic.
See the soft snowflakes swirl in my winter wonderworld.
And honestly, even when the show's not experimenting, it looks really nice. Especially with a more pastel colour palette than we're used to seeing from Adventure Time. Like, I know it's still Adventure Time, so, like, how good can it really look? But even so, Fiona and Cake is generally just more pleasing on the eye. And it also needs to be pointed out that the voice cast throughout the series is solid, but my god, does Tom Kenny deserve all the plaudits for his performance as Simon Petrikov. He is tone perfect for every word.
Sometimes I used to dress up like Ice King. After I became me again, I guess I missed being him in a way. Things felt simpler back then. I was too out of it to understand how screwed up my life was. But even that stopped working after a while.
I know it's kind of just the texture of Tom Kenny's vocals, but hearing the Ice King's voice so dialed back, heavy with resignation and regret, and being able to hear those moments where he starts to find hope and joy again, I honestly feel like going back and listening to the original Ice King now is going to be an entirely different experience having heard Simon in this. So yeah, Fiona and Cake does pretty much everything right. If I had any criticisms, it would maybe be that the final episode didn't hit quite as hard as it could have. Simply because at some point you can see the broad strokes of what's going to happen with Fiona's world and Simon coming, so it's not massively impactful when they play out as expected, but that is a pretty minor criticism. I'd much rather the show deliver on its promises than try some shocking twist and drop the ball. Honestly, this show has been such a breath of fresh air, both from a sense of seeing a streaming service put out a sequel, spin-off, reboot, or whatever that isn't just a pale imitation of the source material, and from seeing Adventure Time finally commit to a proper full season storyline. Something I'd always wanted to see back during my obsessed fan phase. And there's something incredibly satisfying in that finally playing out with characters first created to parody fanfiction. In more ways than one, the fandom is directly responsible for Fiona and Cake, both as characters and as a show, and that's pretty neat, even for someone who hasn't paid attention to the franchise for a good few years now. Maybe I should actually check out Distant Lands at some point.